Okay, so my name is Lindsay Peterson.
I'm Allison. We met.
I'm Emily King.
Awesome. Okay, so uh, I guess I'll just start addressing the questions. So, from the movie Amazing Grace, what doctrine in Wilbur's heart drove him to advocate? And why is the doctrine of the family so important to have in your heart to be passionate and persistent? So, I can either go first or you guys can, whatever you want.
I can start.
Okay.
Um, I don't know. I mean, my answers are pretty long, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I can, just give little parts, and then you guys can add more, because I'm sure you have what I have too.
Cool.
Something that really stands out to me about Wilbur is how deeply he strives to do the work of God. His main priority is, what God wants and doing what he thinks God would want him to do, and I think this means a lot, especially like to me as an advocate, because that's something I really relate to. When you're working with the family, especially in the LDS religion, you definitely have that religion behind you, and that's one of the main focuses in protecting the family and striving to help the family is how we feel about the family and how important family is. And you can definitely see that in Wilbert, because he just throughout the whole movie, everything he's doing, he's always praying, he's always considering if this is what God would want him to do and all that.
Yeah, and I think one thing that was like, and I've seen this movie like a couple years ago, and then rewatching it, because the first time I watched it, it was like really hard for me to see, just because the slavery aspect just is, obviously really difficult to watch. But I love the emphasis he places on his family and how much support that he draws from them and from his loved ones and from like his friends, because like I think it's pretty evident that without his family support, like he wouldn't have been able to continue on. But just the fact that beyond that, he seeks God, like just what Allison was saying, just all the time, and he just constantly is wanting support from God, and which that's really difficult. Over 20 years, like that's really difficult to say that convicted about, his faith amidst so much like trial and adversity. So I really liked that aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really true. I thought that too. It especially when he was met with so much opposition and people just did not agree with him. It would be hard to stick to it and to be persistent. So, but yeah, I'm right along with you guys. I said that it had a lot to do with his faith in God and just the idea that all men are created equal, and that shouldn't have been happening in the first place. And so the second part to that question asks why the doctrine of the family should be in our hearts, and I think it's for the same reason. It's just because if it's in our hearts, then we can protect it and be passionate and persistent in defending it, which is what he did the whole time, over a long span of time, and that's why he didn't quit, because it was in his heart. So.
Right, I agree, and I think it's cool to recognize that, obviously, like the trials that he was going through are going to be more in your face than a lot of the things that we'll have to deal with, but just like a similar thing, like when you were talking about like being persistent and passionate, just that when we're faced with different like contradictory things just from the world and how like social views and other things like that, but if we are really persistent and if we have that doctrine in our hearts, we'll be able to continue on and to continue being an advocate. So
I think knowing the doctrine is important too, because it helps with your passion. Like if you know the doctrine and you know in your heart that that's true and that's something you believe in, then that passion kind of comes naturally. You're willing to fight for it a little harder, and you're willing to stick it out a little longer and go through a little bit more, because you know that this is true and this is what you want to fight for. And yeah.
Yeah, I like that, because it's like it's if it's in your heart, it's really like a part of you. So that's why you can give up on it.
Yeah, I like that.
So do you guys have anything else to add, or should I go to the second one?
We can go to the second one, for me, at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
It says, how did Wilbur employ a theoretical or Brockenbrenner approach to become a more effective advocate? Identify at least one thing in each system and be specific.
I had to go back and reread these.
So I had to make sure I was doing it right.
I always have to look at a model of that thing. I can never remember it from my head.
Me too.
My question was just like institutions and groups most prevalent in his life, like the more immediate. So, like his belief in God and his immediate family support there. An example. My computer's freaking out.
Yeah. I think throughout like his petitioning, I guess you could say, you definitely see him like advocate throughout all the systems. Like, you see him going to government meetings and in politic meetings and petitions, and that's definitely more of like the exit system and that. And I also I think his name is Clark, right? Who travels to go meet other slaves and get their stories. Like, they definitely branch out of just their environment, and they also, just see him talking to everyday people and talking to people on the streets and talking with his family about it and his church leaders and everything like that. Cambry.
Right.
That's not it. But, we see him on all different levels talking to people and getting information and trying to share his message on any way and field that he can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so I mean that's what I put too. He went through every part of the system.
Kind of just like the ebb and flow of whatever, because he kept going from system to system and like interconnecting.
Yeah. Well, then that's another part of him being persistent, I guess, because he covered all his bases, if you will. You know.
No, for sure.
Yeah, he didn't miss anybody.
That's a good point. And
Wherever
I think
he was telling them.
I think just like in the macro system, just understanding the culture at the time is, I don't know, that part of it's really interesting to me, just because the culture was such that he was getting so much pushback from with his beliefs and how he was advocating for the abolition of slavery and other things like that, and realizing that like the culture of our day is such that we're also receiving so much, like whenever we, like as LDS advocates, would suggest a certain topic, because it is so unpopular, we get obviously not the same amount, but we get lots of like pushback as well.
Yeah.
And hesitation from the culture. So.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
It's still just crazy to me to even think that was even a part of our history.
Yeah. That it still happens today. That's what really blows my mind.
Yeah, actually, hopefully this won't be off topic, but my mom and I were talking the other day, and she was saying how, it'll be interesting to see the things we have to deal with in our day, like they did have to deal with slavery back then. But then she's like, I wonder what like my kids will argue about, or have struggles about, and once all that's gone. But really, I pointed out to her that it's not really gone. Like, it's gone, but there's definitely still racism, and people still talk about it. So I don't know that it ever really has
I
been.
think yeah, I agree. I like that. And I think it's just like the root of it is that people are so unkind to one another and so, abrasive in their views. So whether it's slavery or racism or, the feminism struggle or whatever it is, it's a lot of it just boils down to like people wanting power over other people, just like the unkindness that surrounds. So
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that'll ever go away. I think people are definitely always going to try to one-up each other and be on top and be better than everyone else, and that's scary, especially with, things we see happening today of what could be next and what they're going to try to make okay.
Right. I know we're but this is kind of answering the last couple questions about our thoughts on it, so this all works nice together. But one thing that I was, like, when we were talking about this, is that, like we are saying, like, it probably won't go away. Like, that's the realistic, idea is, like, it probably won't go away, like, this unkindness or this, the pride, desire for power and other things like that. But that is, all of those things are the complete opposite of Christ's true doctrine about loving each other and loving God and giving support to the needy and to one another and just really helping each other, like, on the right path. So I don't know, it's just so interesting when you take a step back to see the stark difference between the world and Christ. And I know, like, we talk about it all the time, but, like, when you really look at the facts, it's so black and white, the difference there. And I know that, like, a lot of people are trying, and that's on their way, to following Christ's doctrine, but this difference is so stark to me. So
I agree. I really agree. And I feel like it's true. If you go back to any historical event, pride and hatred have, like, always been there, no matter what it is. And that's sad. But
it's really sad. Right.
Well, even when you look, like, in the scriptures, their whole cycle of pride, like, even in, like, our church and in the history of our religion, like, we still have pride as a problem, and
definitely.
Definitely makes you think it's not going anywhere.
But I think, like, with that, it's also important to recognize that, because, like, I know I struggle with pride for sure at different points in my life, or, whatever it might be. So just recognizing, like, that the parts of society that we're so, like, oh, why would they ever do that? It's like, oh, I wonder how much of that I exhibit, like, on a daily basis, or, like, in my own heart, even if it is, like, more subtle. But I don't know.
I like that too, because if anybody's going to change, we all kind of have to do some self,
like, introspective and realize that we all have issues and that we're
exactly. Because if not, then we're just the ones pointing the finger, saying that everyone else is doing it wrong, and then that's prideful.
And I think that's one of the, like, that was one of my favorite parts of this class, is that I felt like Sister, like, did a good job explaining that if we're going to be doing these things, we need to have other people, like, respect us, but we also need to respect them as humans and as individuals and with their religious beliefs and other things like that. So
yeah, definitely. We won't get anywhere otherwise.
For sure.
Okay, so the next question says, how did Wilbur and his fellow advocates do and share their research? And what evidence did they provide to persuade those opposing or on the fence? So I kind of just went back to kind of like the Brofenbrenner system. They sought out individuals who had witnessed things firsthand, and they had their research in different forms. Like, there was the petition, and then there was showing the people on the boat, like, the actual smell and the actual things that were happening on the boat. But so basically, they provided the evidence that it was inhumane, and that they should have nothing to do with that.
Definitely. And I think in one of the scenes, he's, like, storming around in, like, a passionate way and just saying, like, we need to, like, go to the schools and go to the churches and go to the streets and explain, like, what's happening. And I just really like the fact that he was wanting to give the real information to as many people as possible, and he wasn't trying to hide things or be deceitful. In that way, he was trying to honestly, like, give as much information and just explain to the people in England at the time just what really was going on and how, like, horrific the slave trade really was. So
yeah.
I kind of talked about those same things, like he showed them the boat, the meeting they had on the boat, and kind of stuff. I think that's kind of what he did, especially for people that are on the fence, is he actually, had visual aids in a sense, showed them the actual boat and showed them the chains and where they were and the conditions they were in. And I think that helped persuade a lot of other people, because, you can talk about it and hear stories, and that's one thing, but when you actually see it firsthand, see what they were living with, like you definitely, it hits you a little bit harder. And I think also like the passion that he had for what he was doing definitely made people want to listen to him more and take him more seriously, because you could see it just in the way he would talk about it, how much he cared about those people and how strongly he believed that this was wrong and that it needed to stop. And it really made people take him more seriously.
Right.
That's true. I was thinking, you know, because when you're on the outside of it, you know, especially now, because it's in the past, you think, how in the world could anybody even think of that idea and think that it's okay, or hear what was happening to these people, but still think it's fine. But it took actually seeing and actually smelling and actually, you know, being physically there, and like you said, Allison, like visually, for them to really get it. And so it's just, I don't know, it's interesting to me because I think that's probably still true. Like people need more for some reason to get it sometimes.
Taking more of the evidence and the facts, yeah.
Definitely.
For sure.
It's kind of sad that that's still where we are in the world, that, you know, we can hear stories of bombings and torture, and it doesn't really affect us that much until we see it. And, you know, that's sad, especially when you're advocating.
Scary. That's really scary.
Yeah, it is scary that people aren't really going to do anything unless it's literally right in front of them.
Right.
Exactly.
So I think like with the whole like being an advocate and becoming an advocate, that's kind of going against like this natural tendency we all have to say like, oh, someone else will do a better job, like someone else is taking care of it, but to really just, if there is an issue, and to become like as informed as possible and to go about and to do good and to take that initiative and to not assume that other people will take care of it, because they oftentimes won't. So
Exactly. I think that's a really good point. That's like, that's kind of like what, like the standby, is it called the standby effect or something?
oh yeah, like the bystander.
Nothing. Yeah, so you just, other people will take care of it. Like surely somebody will do something, and then everybody ends up doing nothing. So.
Well, that makes me think about like at the end of the movie when, well, kind of not really towards the end, but when he got sick and like wanted to give up, and Barbara was like, if you give up, no one else is gonna fight for it.
Right.
You know, it's kind of that, like we have to put ourselves in that situation that even if we think we're not doing very much and aren't helping, we're still doing something.
Right.
And we still need to fight it.
Yeah. I do too.
That's awesome.
So the next question says, how does the film portray the importance of working together as a group? And what has family advocacy group work taught you? I feel like we kind of just covered that. I mean,
yeah, I feel like we did too.
Yeah, I mean, it's critical. Like the more people that stand together, the more change they can bring, and it's easier than just one person alone. But also, every person in there matters. Like, so that's really the main point, is that people stand together. The more educated they are, the more change can be brought about, and it would just improve, I guess.
Right. Just like the collectivity and like how important it is to be unified as a group. Yeah. And I think like going personal for a second, like when they're talking about like this like group work that we've had throughout the semester, I've been like really impressed because my work schedule is so crazy and it's been so hard for me to make it to every meeting. So I feel like our group, because I know like we're in the group before, but it was bigger. Everybody was just so like nice and accommodating, and so that was important to me.
Yeah. I think also when you are in a group, like you all have different resources. So like when we saw like in the movie, like, you know, Wilbur could talk all he wants, but it took, you know, someone who actually used to be a slave to have the chains and to know where the boat was and to have stories from other people, and you know that ended up being something that really affected a lot of people, and that was something Wilbur would have never had if he was just trying to do this by himself.
Right.
So being willing and open to other people and the things that they have can really help you as a whole.
Yeah, I like that. That like going back to the pride thing that we were talking about, just that wanting other people and using their resources and acknowledging that other people have, good ideas and things that they, should suggest. But it kind of releases a little bit of pride in ourselves and just saying, no, I need help and I need unity.
Kind of need people to bring you back down to the level, I guess. I like that.
Great.
Okay, so moving on, it says, what parallels do you see between Wilbur and Captain Moroni in Alma 46? What is a Christian and professional family advocate, and how did Wilbur exemplify that? How can you be effective and Christ-like against such loud and often degrading voices? So I said that basically the parallel between them is that they both had to stand and fight for what was right. And within that chapter, a Christian is explained as a true believer of Christ. And so I'd say that a professional family advocate is someone who advocates for the purposes of Christ.
Right.
And I think Wilbur definitely exemplified that by doing what he felt was right, and talking to God and saying, how should we do this, basically. So.
No, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I agree. I loved the in Alma 46:33, it talks about acknowledging that people will die for the sake of Christ, and it talks about these individuals died firmly believing that their souls would be redeemed by the Lord. So I think with that in mind, and on a lesser scale, not thinking that we're going to lose our lives necessarily, but just thinking that we'll be rewarded eventually, and even though we'll be faced with lots of hostility, potentially being an advocate, but that we'll be rewarded and that Christ will be with us. And so I really like that, the firmly believing aspect.
I really like that they both frequently counseled with God too. We see in the beginning of the chapter, Moroni prays of just not knowing what to do and for strength and guidance, and we see that with Wilbur too, that he prays of what should he do, and should he fight or should he go into government, and I think that's really important. Obviously we'll probably never be faced with this big of an issue, but just in little things and just fighting for the family, to always just counsel with our Heavenly Father and have the Spirit there so that we can be better advocates and make sure that we're doing what He would want us to do.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
That's really good.
I agree. Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I said for the second part of that question, is that we can be effective against loud and degrading voices of opposition by staying true to our Christianity. And basically, kind of like what you've been saying the whole time, Emily, is if we address people as Christ would, with kindness, and try to emulate that, we can stand for what's right without being contentious and prideful and filled with hatred.
Right. And I think in the film, Wilbur, obviously, he was really heated at times, but I felt he overall did do a good job of being really passionate, but also trying to keep Christ's light about him, and recognizing the reasons why he was fighting, not because this was something he was passionate about by itself, but because he really felt that God was directing him to continue on the fight and other things like that. So
yeah, that's true. Okay. So the next one says, Marcia Barlow spoke on persuasive speaking and writing. Did Wilbur and others exemplify any of Marcia's ideas, and how so? And yeah, exactly. Yes, obviously they exemplified her ideas on persuasive speaking, because every scene you watched in the House of Commons, they were standing up and speaking persuasively, trying to sway the majority to agree with them.
Right.
Yes, big time.
Yeah, I think literally everything that they were doing was persuasive, and just the fact that I really liked the fact that they were remaining really personal in it, and with having other slaves give their stories, and I can't remember the name. Who is the former slave ship captain who came to Christ, and
I can't remember. I didn't know any names.
You know, with, like that.
You're talking
Priest. I don't
about.
remember.
Yeah, the priest. Yeah, and how he was talking about like the 20,000 ghosts and just
Oh
how
Yeah.
he was, and I felt like this film, I don't know. I felt like the film did such a good job of keeping it really personal and just, oh, I'm sorry, your child's sad, but like in a persuasive way because this man was so willing to be vulnerable and to say like, this is where I've been and this is where I want to be and other things like that. Like I felt like the like personal connection part of the persuasion was that was like most impactful for me at least.
yeah, I agree. That's a really.
Oh,
Yeah, I think also the way he tied in like emotion to everything he had and like his passion. I know we kind of already talked about that,
no,
but
but
just
yeah.
like everything, every time you talk to someone, like you could just see the passion in his eyes and feel the emotion and feel how important this was to him. And I think that we saw that a lot in the Barlow videos and stuff. That if you're not passionate about it, people aren't really gonna want to listen to you. So.
It's true. It really does make a difference on how you carry yourself when you're fighting, I guess, or advocating, not really fighting, but
No, for sure.
okay. Oops, my thing just okay. So the next one says, what role did the government, policy, and religious freedom play in the fight of the slave trade? Did you see their political system being pro-family, and why or why not? So I'm interested to see what you guys said in here, because I kind of confused myself answering this question.
I think obviously that was like one of the most important components of the movie and of this period of time was the government and was the policy. But like at the time, the religious freedom and the political views were so enmeshed that was kind of confusing for me as well to think about, just because it was like the Church of England and the like lawmakers and the policymakers of England of the Parliament. So that was interesting, and just kind of how there was like these divided forces, but they were also like under the Church of England, and I don't know, that was kind of confusing to me. But
Yeah.
I definitely did not feel that the Parliament in and of itself was pro-family, obviously, but that like Wilbur and all of his kind of goals were gearing up towards like not only being pro-family but being pro-God, and like why these policies mattered to him and why like abolishing slavery was important to him was because it was important to God, and so he was kind of trying to intermesh the two because he was so passionate about his.
I agree. I mean, definitely the government played a big role in slavery because they're the ones who, made the policy and initially made it okay. So of course they're the only ones that can make it illegal on that sense.
Yeah.
I didn't see the government as being pro-family either. They kind of seem to care about their own family and how their family is provided for, but they didn't care about the other families they're disrupting in order to get that satisfaction. They're really selfish and just wanted the easiest life and didn't really care how they got it. And the religious beliefs kind of confused me too. Like, I kind of talked about how like the religious beliefs of the slaves were pretty much taken away, and we heard Clark talk about a lot about how like his religion helped him through his journey and like his trials, and I think that plays a lot in it too. And with Wilbur, definitely his religion, like that's one of the main reasons he was fighting. And I think a lot of the other people, like the Christian church that was behind him, why they were fighting too, because they knew that it was wrong and their religion, kind of told them so.
Yeah. I'm glad I'm not the only one who's kind of confused by that, because
I think the wording in the question too was like a little weird. But.
Yeah.
It's hard to like understand who they wanted us to talk about.
I know. I was like, whatever.
You want to know if the government is pro-family or like if Wilbur is pro-family? Like, it's kind of confusing.
So I was like, well, it could be, but it could not be. It depends on what the majority said, and yeah,
right.
there was a struggle in there, so I'm not really sure how to answer that. But
it was a little awkward.
okay. So the next one says, do you feel that Wilbur used his time on Earth well? And how did you see him showing the elements of consecration that Elder Christofferson spoke of? So I said, I definitely feel that Wilbur used his time on Earth well, because he used his time to help others and to stand up for those who couldn't for themselves. And he knew that he was fulfilling the purposes that God intended him to. And the way that Elder Christofferson explained consecration was basically devoting your time and your life to the purposes of God. And so I feel like that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like along with the consecration part, it's like submitting like your will to God's will. Like Wilbur's whole life, like there were those times he was so sick and he was like, I just need to give up and whatever, but that he was submitting his will to God, and regardless of his health and regardless of all these different things going on and how much opposition he was facing for 20 years, essentially, that because he was completely devoted, because he consecrated his life, but also like his heart, and he genuinely had a change of heart and just really wanted, obviously, change to be brought about. So I also agree that he did use his time on Earth very well.
I also agree that he used his time on Earth wisely. Stop it. Goodness.
He just left. Okay, it's okay.
Figures that she goes crazy. Okay. When I was thinking about like Elder Christofferson's talk, I was thinking a lot about how he talked about the physical body and how that was one of the elements of consecration. And I thought of how, like, of course Wilbur took care of his body and stuff, but I thought about how he was striving to take care of the African Americans' bodies. Like, that was kind of a profound thought. Like, these people couldn't protect themselves, so Wilbur was really trying to protect them, and it was just kind of a weird thing about, like, the physical body with that, and that he actually was fighting for the right for them to take care of their own body.
I like that. That's a really good thought. Thank you.
And I thought about, like, he talked about integrity as well in the talk, and I thought a lot about, like, how he dealt with the parliament and the government, and he was always, like, honest and upfront with them. He wasn't trying to, like, deceive them or, use stories in a way to manipulate them into believing what he was saying, which, we definitely saw Parliament doing back to him. But he was just very honest and very upfront, and, he showed a lot of integrity in just the way he dealt with the people that opposed him.
Right. I agree.
Until he said that they would cheat. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, yeah.
We just won't remember that.
I agree. Thanks for that. Okay, so this next question says, any other profound thoughts or personal insights from the movie that are related to child and family advocacy? So I basically said that the most important thing we need to remember when we're advocating is that that we pray and that we know that the things we're fighting for are right. And obviously, like we said the whole time, Wilbur was a good example of that because, he kept talking to God and knew that what he was fighting for was the will of God.
Yeah, I feel like we talked a lot about our thoughts on this, but like one thing for me, like the complete opposite of apathy was shown throughout the film, and when being a family advocate for, in our own lives and on a societal level, that it's so important to not have this apathetic belief system, because that's so common in America today, to just be like, someone else, it's fine, it'll work out, but just really taking charge and being assertive and trying to gain as much information as possible. That was another thing that was really important to me, was that he was not only trying to gain knowledge for himself, but he was trying to distribute it to as many people as possible. So like gaining knowledge so we're not apathetic was like one of my main points that I found really pivotal.
I like that.
I mentioned I mentioned kind of those things too, but I mentioned that I think it's important to have people like Barbara in our lives as advocates. I'm sure things will get hard, and I'm sure there'll be times when we just want to give up and kind of stop fighting. But we need people by our side that will support us and that believe in our fight, whether they're like our spouses or family or friends. It's important to have that support by us. When we want to give up, we need someone there to help us remember why we started fighting in the first place and why it's important for us to continue that fight.
Right. I like that.
Yeah, I do too. I do too.
Thanks.
So, the second to last question says, what was your understanding of the doctrine of the family at the beginning of the semester, and how has it changed? So, I'm also interested to see what you guys said, because I don't know. I thought that my understanding of the doctrine of the family at the beginning of the semester is that it's essential to Heavenly Father's plan, and I don't really feel like my actual understanding of the doctrine changed, but I've changed my thinking and like how I need to be involved, if that makes sense. So I don't know if like the actual understanding of the doctrine was what changed, more of like thoughts about advocating. So that's what
I had similar thoughts, and my doctrine, like the doctrine aspect of the family hasn't changed for me because, like you said, like that family is the central part of God's commandments and like exaltation, other things like that. But this semester has been interesting because, like, one of my best friends this is personal too, but that's fine, whatever. But one of my really good friends has decided to. She came out of the closet and she is telling me that she's lesbian and whatever, but she's also not. She's really wanting to like immerse herself in like that type of those types of relationships, and and I'm just trying to like love her and support her and other things like that. But the part that I've been like, oh, this class actually was helpful, is that she kept saying things about like gender and how like there's like this fluidity and you're whatever you want to be at the time and at the moment and whatever. And like I was grateful that I was able to just, because normally I would have been more apathetic and I would have been like, yeah, think whatever you want to think and like you figure it out and that's not for me to judge, which it isn't, and I fully believe that, and it's way more important to love and to not judge, but to also like be firm and say like I do believe that gender is like an essential part of who we are as humans, and that we're either male or we're female, and God doesn't make mistakes, and we were male or female prior to this life, and we'll be male or female, in the next life. So that was kind of a interesting experience for me this semester. So.
Oh.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it's kind of the same. Like, I don't think my doctrine really, like, grew profoundly. I mean, I still, kind of the same as you, Lindsay. Like, I thought family was an essential part of the plan. I still believe that. So I don't think it got a whole lot deeper. I think it got a little, like, broader. I think maybe before this semester started, every time I thought of the family, it was kind of just a strictly LDS view of, marriage and temples and kids and kind of more of that aspect. But now I think when I think about the family, I think more of the negative things that are affecting the family. I think a lot more of like poverty and education and gender and those kind of things. Whereas before, I don't think I really, I don't want to say I like didn't pay attention to them, but I don't think they were like key components in my definition of the family.
Yeah.
And now I have a lot more understanding of why they're so important and how detrimental they can be to the family and why it's so important for us to advocate for them, because they really do affect the family. And, of course, that affects our church and our religion and our personal families. So.
Yeah, I like that. I agree. It's kind of like it just opens your eyes more to what is happening or what's out there, rather than just thinking kind of more in your small circle of what family means to you and stuff, because that's kind of what I did too. But
yeah, I really like that. Thank you.
All right, so our last question says, picture your spouse and children, current or future, and write down some thoughts about how they will benefit from you taking this class. So I had like, 5 bullet points, I think. and I was really super vague on these, but I said that it'll help me teach my children, it will help my husband and I bond, it'll teach me how to defend my family, it'll teach me the importance of being educated, and it will teach me the importance of standing up and not being silent or passive.
Yeah, I like that.
That's really good. I have a daughter, so I'm sure you heard her screaming. I thought kind of more along the lines of her, of like she's going to be going to school with children that are being affected by these threats. You know, maybe she'll have a friend that is raised by, you know, gay parents or that is in poverty and kind of things like that. And I think like helping her be aware of these issues will help her so she can be an advocate and so she can learn to be sensitive to the threats surrounding the family and why it's so important to protect the family. You know, I want her to gain a love for all families in any situation, and taking this class kind of has helped me learn how to express that to her and how to help her figure out what she can do. And I think like the passion too, like as the attacks on the family get more and more frequent, I want my children and my husband to see my passion to protect it. And
Right.
you know, I know I've always had this passion and to protect the family, but I think after taking this class, I know how to portray it better and how to get involved a little bit more and how to get my family involved. And I want to instill in my children the drive and the passion to advocate for the family and advocate for whatever they choose in. And you know, this class has definitely helped me to figure out how I can support them and how I can get them involved in our community and in things that concern us as a family or them, and that'll help them in life.
Cool. I like that a lot. Yeah, mine were pretty similar to both of you guys, and just the importance of being engaged in your community, because that's not something normally I would do. So just that it is important to be engaged and to be as educated as possible, and being able to teach your children from a young age, and that it's okay to, you know, let them know what's going on in the world, you know, on an appropriate basis, but just to teach them into from, you know, in the home, and how important that is to be an advocate in the home so that you can be an advocate outside of the home with your family as a unit. So, really important.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for sharing all of your.
That was all.
And it's,
Thank you
it's
for
been a
sharing.
good, it's been a good semester. So
Thanks for leading it today.
what's that?
I said thanks for leading it today.
Oh, no
Yeah,
problem.
thank you.
Problem at all. Okay, I'm
It's very
gonna.
helpful when you just send a link for us to follow.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.